While American bombers were carrying out Operation Epic Fury over Iran yesterday, the United States Senate was effectively paralyzed. We have a government shutdown at the Department of Homeland Security. TSA agents are working without pay, and a top administration official was accused on the House floor of accepting $50,000 in illicit cash.
It's a lot to take in for a Tuesday. It feels like the policy equivalent of trying to fix a jet engine while the plane is in a nosedive. You have these massive geopolitical movements in the Middle East, but then you look at the Senate floor and they're arguing over whether a youth sports registration is a good metaphor for voting rights.
If you look at the transcript from yesterday, March 24th, that's exactly where we are. Welcome to Floor Notes.
And I'm Reed. We're digging into the Congressional Record to figure out why the Department of Homeland Security is currently running on fumes, and what that has to do with a fatal shooting in Minneapolis.
Let's start with the DHS Hostage Crisis. That's not my term. That's the energy in the building right now. The Department of Homeland Security has been in a funding lapse since mid-February. The catalyst, for those who haven't been following the recent episodes, was the fatal shooting of two U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, by federal agents in Minneapolis back in January.
Right. And that tragedy has turned into a total legislative impasse. Democrats are refusing to fully fund the department until they get major ICE reforms, things like body cameras and stricter judicial warrants. But yesterday, the stakes shifted. Republican Senator John Thune of South Dakota moved to proceed to the DHS appropriations bill, but with a massive catch.
The catch is the Save America Act. Republicans are essentially saying they won't pay the TSA or the Coast Guard unless Democrats agree to a national requirement for proof of citizenship to register to vote. Senator Thune actually used that youth sports analogy I mentioned. He said, "I haven't heard a lot of sob stories about how someone would have signed up their kids for Little League if only the paperwork wasn't so darned complicated."
Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois challenged that comparison. He pointed to the actual data on non-citizen voting. If you look at the record, Durbin said, 77 people in the United States of America, in a 24-year period of time, tried to vote when they were not legally entitled to vote. 77 people. So the Republicans want us to change all of the laws on registration across the United States because of 77 people.
It's a standard Hill standoff. You have one side arguing it's a common-sense security measure, and the other calling it a poll tax because of the cost of passports or the difficulty of finding birth certificates. But while this was happening in the Senate, Representative Seth Magaziner, a Democrat from Rhode Island, introduced a startling allegation on the House floor during a 1-minute speech.
This was wild. Magaziner was alleging systemic corruption at the highest levels of DHS. He specifically named Tom Homan, who has been leading the negotiations with senators to end this very shutdown. Magaziner claimed, and I'm quoting the record here, Tom Homan was caught on tape accepting $50,000 of cash in a paper bag from undercover FBI agents.
Wait, let that hang for a second. The very person tasked with brokering a deal to end the shutdown is now facing a federal bribery allegation. That's a staggering development to find in the transcript.
It certainly complicates the trust factor in these negotiations. And while that allegation was circulating, Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine submitted a massive amendment to try and find a compromise. Her proposal, Amendment 4775, would actually slash funding for ICE's operations and support by over $5.4 billion.
$5.4 billion. That's a huge number. It's a tactical move, cutting the specific part of the budget Democrats are angry about to try and get the rest of DHS, like FEMA and the TSA, back online. But the Republican leadership in the Senate seems more focused on the voter ID fight. Senator Thune actually blocked a motion from Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York that would have created a path just to pay the TSA workers.
Schumer was pretty pointed about it. He called the ICE presence at airports intimidation forces and mentioned that wait times in Houston hit 6 hours over the weekend. He even pointed out the irony of the situation, noting that former President Trump who is pushing the SAVE Act, recently used mail-in voting himself in a Florida special election.
The transcript shows the Senate voted twice, 53 to 47, to keep the focus on the voter ID amendment rather than the TSA pay. Consequently, that funding remains in limbo while the chamber continues its ideological debate.
While that domestic fire was burning, the Senate was also forced to look east. We are 5 days into Operation Epic Fury. That's the sustained bombing campaign against Iran. And according to Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, we're in a full-blown constitutional crisis over it.
Senator Murphy brought a war powers resolution to the floor yesterday. His argument is one we've heard before, but it carries a different weight while the military campaign is already underway. He pointed out that the administration's goals seem to be shifting in real time. Originally, we were told this was about stopping a nuclear program. Now, the administration says it's about reopening the Strait of Hormuz.
Murphy offered a pointed critique on that issue. He said the strait was open before the war began, so we are now seeking to solve a problem that we created. He also dropped a staggering figure. The U.S. is spending at least $2 billion every single day on this conflict. That figure represents a daily burn rate, separate from any supplemental funding.
$2 billion a day. To put that in perspective, Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin did some math on the floor. She noted that in just 6 days, the war has cost $12 billion. She compared that to the cost of social programs, saying that $30 billion, what we've spent in the first few weeks, could have provided free school lunches for 30 million children for an entire year.
And the human cost is mounting too. Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California noted that 2,500 Marines from Camp Pendleton are currently on their way to the region aboard the USS Portland and the USS Boxer. He reminded the chamber that we've already lost an American service member nearly every 2 days of this conflict. He mentioned Chief Warrant Officer 3 Robert Marzan from Sacramento, who was killed in an Iranian strike in Kuwait.
Schiff used a quote that left a lasting impression on the chamber. He cited Herbert Hoover, saying, "Older men declare war, but it is the youth that must fight and die." He was pushing the point that this war hasn't even had a single open hearing in the Senate.
On the other side, Republican Senator Jim Risch of Idaho was incredibly firm. He argued that the U.S. didn't start this, that Iran has been in conflict with us for 47 years. He even had a message directly for the Iranians, saying, "Breaking news, no one is coming to help you. The Chinese are not coming. The Russians are not coming." He framed any congressional hesitation as helping the Iranians.
The debate also touched on the economic fallout here at home. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia pointed out that gas prices have jumped over $1 a gallon since the war started. For his constituents in Virginia, who buy 8 million gallons of fuel a day, that's $8 million a day leaving their pockets because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz.
And yet, Republican Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas pointed out that despite the war, the Treasury Department recently issued waivers for oil sanctions on Russia and Iran to try and stabilize those very prices. He called it desperation, arguing that we're essentially enriching the people we're currently bombing.
It's a circular logic that seems to be exhausting everyone. You have Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth promising larger waves of attacks, while the Senate is stuck in this loop of war powers resolutions that don't have the 60 votes to pass. Senator Murphy said he'll be back every week to force these votes until something changes.
The contrast is stark. In one room, they're debating whether the government can afford to pay the people who screen you at the airport. In the other, they're watching billions of dollars and thousands of Marines move toward a war that technically hasn't been authorized.
Before we go, there was one more thought from Senator Baldwin that frames the scale of these numbers. While the administration is asking for a $200 billion supplemental to fund the war, she noted how that massive investment contrasts with the domestic funding currently stalled on the floor.
It really puts the power of the purse into perspective, given the massive scale of these concurrent debates. A very expensive week on the Hill.
That's Floor Notes for today.
We'll see you next time. Stay informed out there.